Honestly, it's not that uncommon for something that I've built to explode or catch on fire. And with that in mind, in this video I want to make my ideal test bed, not only to contain all of my bad ideas, but also to have all the features I might need to test whatever I want to in the future. So some of you might have noticed that I haven't posted a video in a little while. Part of the reason for that is that I bought a house, and now that it's my house instead of just my parents' house, I don't want a test going wrong to damage my beautiful backyard or to irritate my neighbors. So it needs to keep things quiet, but more importantly, it needs to keep me safe. Then it also needs to have a couple of features to make me more likely to use it, like being quick and easy to set up, helping me film, and helping me record data. And finally, it needs to be modular so I can add whatever other feature I might need in the future. Alright, here's a crazy idea. What if we took the exploding thing and we put it in a box? And really, with just a couple of small tweaks, this will cover all of our requirements. First up, instead of something like cardboard, it should be stronger for reusability and for safety, so we'll go with steel. I came up with an idea of using angle iron for the edges and sheet steel for the faces of the test bed. This makes it modular since any panel can be replaced by just removing a handful of bolts, and I can weld the frame so that the entire thing can come apart in two halves. I added a hole to pass through cabling and then some bulkhead fittings to pass through compressed air or water. I also added mounting holes for things like a strain gauge to measure forces. And finally, as an active safety measure, I want a nozzle that can spray water into the chamber in case of fire. Essentially, the frame is made out of 12 segments of 1/8 inch angle iron, and that frame holds 5 panels of 11 gauge sheet steel which form the main body of the box. And now hopefully all of that together might be enough to shield me from my bad decisions. Speaking of bad decisions, unfortunately my local steel provider does not cut miters on angle iron, which I need to make the frame fit together properly. And even more unfortunately, I thought to myself, that's not that many cuts, why go out and buy an angle grinder when I could just use a hacksaw? So after cutting a miter 16 times at about 15 minutes a pop, that's about 4 hours I spent that probably would have been much less with an angle grinder. But with that done, I can start marking out the spacing I'll need for holes to bolt everything together later. And keeping with the theme of poor decision making, I'll be using a hand drill and the world's okayest cutting fluid at WD-40. But I think it'll be alright, I only have to do this 56 times. With the pieces of the frame done, I can use them as a guide to figure out where to drill the holes on the steel panels. And doing it this way means that I can shift things around and make sure that there's enough space for things to come together easily in the end. And then when I'm happy with the layout, I can clamp each section down and copy its holes through to the steel plate, bolting everything together as I go. But this does mean drilling 56 more holes without a drill press or good cutting fluid. And for those of you keeping track at home, that's already cutting 16 miters, drilling 56 holes, drilling another 56 holes, and then tightening 56 nuts on 56 bolts.
55 burgers, 55 fries, 55 tacos, 55 pies, 55 cokes!
Not to mention also deburring each cut and each side of each drilled hole. The box is now in a place that it can hold itself together, but it's not as rigid as I would like it to be, and sunlight could shine through the gaps in the frame, which would cast all sorts of lines and just look bad while filming. So it's time to wheel it into the backyard and take a stab at welding for the first time in like 10 years, but you'd never be able to guess. Awful. After carting it back, I decided it was time to give it its own wheels because it weighs about 80 pounds and I am not a strong man. The problem is, besides my welds looking bad, they also stick up enough to get in the way of mounting the wheels, so I'll have to grind them off. But not with an angle grinder, with a file, because I don't care about my time enough. After mounting the wheels, it's time to drill the last few holes. These holes will be much larger and they'll be for passing through things like compressed air or electrical signals or outputs into and out of the box. And the noises that this made while drilling was just wonderful. Now I want a sturdy way to hold on to whatever I'm testing inside of the box. So I just quickly designed a bracket, 3D printed it, and then used that to cast it in aluminum. If you want to see more about this process, I made a video where I cast knives out of different metals and then tried to see if they could split bullets. Check the description for a link if you want to watch that after this video. After drilling 2 more holes to actually mount the bracket, I can relax and think back on all the fine metal work I've done while finishing up the last little bit. Now this video has been filled with some truly terrible sounds, so let's move on to how we can mitigate some of that noise, because as it stands now, even a small impact can lead to quite a bit of racket. We have a sheet of steel that gets struck, and it dissipates that energy while it vibrates through sound and heat. So my plan is to use something called constrained layer damping, which will let us trade the sound that we don't want for heat that we don't really care about. It works by first taking the panel and applying what's called a viscoelastic material, something that won't quite flow, but something that is elastic and will return to its original shape. And then on top of that, putting a constraining layer, something rigid that will keep the outer face of the viscoelastic material from deforming, while the face in contact with the panel can stretch and contract with it as it vibrates. This difference in deformation induces shearing inside of the viscoelastic layer, which helps us release energy as heat instead of sound. The Action Lab here on YouTube has a very good video on this going more in depth that I'll link in the description as well. There are commercially available constrained layer dampening tapes out there, but I decided to make my own using some double-sided tape, I think the kids call it W Sigma, and some aluminum sheet metal. The double-sided tape is thick and kind of gummy, so will hopefully work for our viscoelastic layer, while the aluminum is our constraining layer. Alright, let's see how well this works. We'll compare the damped to the undamped tests with a stick, a rubber mallet, and a hammer. So it looks like it dampens a little bit of that initial impact, but mostly it cuts down on the ringing. I'd still say it's better to have it than to not, so I applied it to the rest of the sheets and then painted everything. And now it's time to just put it all together. From here on, having the lights installed will make everything else a lot easier, so I cut up some diffuser channel and installed some LED light strips. I'll attach them to the test bed with magnets, so if I test anything that's really likely to melt them, I can just pull them back out. And I'm actually really happy with how the lighting turned out. It'll make working in the test bed a lot easier, and the quality of the footage will be much higher. For the fire suppression, I tested 2 nozzle designs. The first is similar to an impinging injector, which is a little too direct, but it looks pretty cool. In the end, I went with the second nozzle, which is more of just a ring design, but it has its own issues like it doesn't spray a ton in the very middle, but if that becomes an issue, I can just redesign it later. The nozzle is held inside the test bed using magnets, so I can aim and adjust it depending on what kind of test I'm running, and it's supplied water through the bulkheads, which I'll have these quick connect fittings attached to. And this way I can add or remove the fire suppression system if I need it, or I just want to free up space to have other things go through the bulkheads. I'll be able to turn on and turn off water remotely using a solenoid valve, which I'll be able to attach to a normal garden hose. Finally, I'll also have a bleed valve so I can clear all the air out of the hose so I don't have to wait for water in case of an emergency. The whole thing can attach to any of the bulkheads with the quick connect fitting, and it also happens to be a natural low point in the system, so all the water runs out instead of having a moldy mess inside. Next, I needed to make a controller that could fire off the fire suppression system or trigger whatever else I might need for a test, like a spark gap or igniter or whatnot. There'll be 3 switches and 1 button. The first switch powers the remote. The second switch is an emergency shutoff switch, so as long as it's not flipped, it'll pass power on to the safety switch, which will then pass power on to a button that can trigger whatever device I want. If the emergency switch is hit, then it'll cut power to everything else and instead power the fire suppression system. After some 3D printing, some assembly, and some beautiful cable management, I can clip a portable battery into the base, and then flip it over and attach all the switches using magnets on the top. I guess it doesn't really hurt anything to subscribe, so... Well, I guess it still wouldn't hurt you to subscribe. So now we're able to power on the remote, turn on the safety, and then press the trigger, unless we press the emergency shutoff, which cuts power to everything else. We also have a bonus switch to turn on and off the LEDs inside of the test bed. So to have something to test the trigger, I'll grab the igniter off of my old test stand. It's basically just a battery, a relay, and a barbecue igniter. I designed and 3D printed a box for this so that it would draw less attention on the back of the test bed. I also designed it so it could hold as many magnets as I could possibly need, in case it slid, which it did, so I could add a couple more magnets and it would hold firm, or add enough that it could even hang upside down off the top of the test bed. Before figuring out how to record data, I think it's a good time now to just go ahead and test the test bed. We'll just use some rubbing alcohol and paper to test the igniter, and then use the fire suppression system to put it out. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Well, that's not good. As it turns out, things work better when you plug them in, but we'll just call this a test of the passive safety of the setup. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, the nozzle definitely sprays all around the middle, but it still ends up flooding most of the container, so I think it'll be good enough for now. Alright, the last thing I want to include is a way to record data. For that, I'll use an Arduino and a new strain gauge because the last one got blown off the test stand so hard that it ripped up the wires and damaged it. My original plan was to use a Raspberry Pi as the second half of the controller. It could run a Python script to collect data from the Arduino, and it really only needed 2 buttons, one to turn it on and off, and one to either start or stop recording data. And I actually got it up and running until I ran into an issue where it would just turn off. I know my wiring is too neat for that to be the issue. I tried adding a fan in case it was shutting off due to heat. I tried adding a salvage capacitor to smooth out any power issues. The point is, I tried a lot of potential fixes, but I think the issue comes down to this little USB-C power delivery trigger that everything in the controller uses to request power from the power bank. But I don't know, if you have any ideas, let me know in the comments. For now though, it's a lot easier and a lot simpler just to use a laptop to record data instead. But that's the last thing I wanted to include, so now we can just set up a test to test the test bed's test preparedness. And for that, it seemed fitting to use a 2-liter whoosh rocket like I've used in a lot of previous videos. 3, 2, 1. Three, two, one. Even after just a few tests, it's immediately obvious to me that this setup is a lot easier to set up and to record data and video. Plus, it was exciting for me to see how easy it was to capture things like shock diamonds, which I've had entire videos dedicated to capturing in the past. There are still things that I'll be working out in the future though, like what GoPro angles I like because this isn't good. And there's an issue while recording data while using this barbecue igniter, where the high voltage causes these electromagnetic pulses that can mess with the recorded data or even crash the Arduino. It's only even able to function as well as it does now by things like shielding the strain gauge's wires with aluminum foil that's been grounded, and shortening the barbecue igniter's cables, which were basically acting like antennas. But any more tinkering will have to wait till next time, because I want to finish this video by inducing a failure and maybe getting a cool thumbnail along the way. 3, 2, 1. It was kind of cool. I don't want it to explode, but I want it to be a little bit more catastrophic. And to help with that, I'll pour some alcohol along the outside of the bottle too. 2, 1. I'd say that was good enough. One of those could have been the thumbnail you clicked. Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe to catch my next video in 3 to 9 years.